Good afternoon, Nova Nation. It's WXVU Sports Director David Szczepanski coming to you once again from the warm WXVU studio. And it is time to talk about Villanova football. The second round of the FCS playoffs are here, and it is time for your weekly preview. And hopefully this is not the last week that I'm doing these previews. Hopefully we at least have a few more weekends coming up this season. But of course, win or go home for the Wildcats on Saturday as they will take on Incarnate Word in Texas at 2 p.m. Filming this on Friday, so tomorrow, Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. Let's break down this matchup, right? So Villanova, they are the number 11 seed. They finished the season with a 10-3 overall record that includes the regular season as well as their win against Eastern Kentucky last weekend in the first round of the FCS playoffs at Villanova Stadium. And Villanova, that was a game against EKU where the Wildcats are really lucky to win, right? They turned the ball over 4 times. They were down by 14 points at the end of the first quarter. But as we talk about, right, the old slogan, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And Villanova really succeeded starting in the second quarter. They were able to outscore Eastern Kentucky 22-3 the rest of the game. And the Wildcats defense also really stepped up, right? They really bounced back after giving up a big play on the first drive to Joshua Carter, and overall 14 points in that first quarter of play at Villanova Stadium. So the Wildcats survived. They really succeeded in the rushing attack in the second half, which they'll definitely need in this game against Incarnate Word. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a second. So Villanova 10-3 overall, right? And when you look at their 3 losses this season, they of course lost to Maryland in FBS play way earlier in the season. And then their 2 losses in FCS play came against Maine and Monmouth. That loss came in the second to last week of the regular season. As for Incarnate Word, they come into this game with a 10-2 record. They were undefeated in conference play, 7-0 this season. Of course, they have the bye, so they did not play last weekend, so this will be their first playoff game here in the second round. The same kind of path that Villanova took last year with a first-round bye, not playing into the second round. So that's where Incarnate Word comes into this game. Now, the interesting thing about Incarnate Word is, yes, they had a phenomenal season of conference play, but they started out really poorly. They were 1-2 in their first 3 games, but they have since won 9 consecutive games, so they ended the season on a 9-game winning streak. But they do play in the Southland Conference, which is a pretty weak conference. Besides Incarnate Word, you don't really have a whole lot of talent there when you look at the teams, and a lot of the teams are actually around 500, 4-3, 3-4 records in conference play. So Incarnate Word definitely plays in a weaker conference, but that doesn't mean that they are not a good team and a good program, because they definitely are. When you look at some of their players, Zach Calzada is their quarterback. He's actually a transfer from Texas A&M and Auburn. Calzada has over 3,300 passing yards this season. He has 33 passing touchdowns, one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS, and he's thrown just 8 interceptions. So he does a really good job at getting this offense going. He obviously has a lot of talent. There's a reason why that he was on Auburn and Texas A&M for some time, and since coming over to the FCS play and coming over to Incarnate Word, I mean, he's just really had a tremendous time. He's a great quarterback. He can really throw the football, has a great arm, and really he's probably the best quarterback that Villanova's played this season besides Derek Robertson, and they lost to Derek Robertson and Monmouth a few weeks back. So this is a very talented quarterback. It's a very talented offense that averages 37 points per game. So Villanova has to be ready because they have struggled against some really good passing offenses this season. Some other stats too, they're averaging around 280 passing yards per game, which, I mean, is crazy to think about. They're a really great passing team. And then when you also look at their rushing attack, they don't have a phenomenal rushing attack, but they have 18 total rushing touchdowns this season, and they are led by Declan Taylor, who is their leading running back. He has 9 rushing touchdowns this season for Incarnate Word and the Cardinals. So they definitely have a capable rushing attack, right? They have 18 rushing touchdowns, but they only average about 170 rushing yards per game, which I say only as if it's not a lot. It is a good amount of rushing yards, but they're mainly a passing team. They have a strong passing offense. In terms of their defense too, they're also really good. They'll give up in the low 20s points per game, about 22, 23 points per game. And also some other stats, they are mainly a second half team, and that's going to be very interesting to watch because Villanova has really been a second half team this year. They started off slow in the game against Eastern Kentucky last week. They also started off slow against Monmouth a couple weeks ago. Kind of the exception to that was the Battle of the Blue game against Delaware, which everybody was ready to go for, right? Both teams in what could have been the final Battle of the Blue 2 weeks ago. But for Villanova, I mean, they have to be ready for this game. This is a really tough opponent in Incarnate Word. Like I said, Calzada is really good. Their rushing attack does a pretty good job as well. And, I'll talk about my keys to the game in a separate video coming up. But one thing that does favor Villanova, despite they're playing, in my opinion, a much better offense, right? A much more consistent offense in Incarnate Word. Villanova's offense has shown glimpses of really positive signs this season. And, they've had their success. Connor Watkins, especially over the past few weeks since he's fully recovered from that ankle injury he suffered against Stony Brook, he has really ran the football at a much higher level, similar to what we saw last year and in the early part of the season. And he's also thrown the football much better. But I think that even Connor would probably say that it hasn't been as good of a season as he perhaps hoped. But he's had a pretty good past couple weeks for Villanova. He did turn the football over a few times last week, but finished the game with 177 yards and 2 passing touchdowns in the game against Eastern Kentucky. But Villanova's offense still does struggle at times. It's inconsistent, definitely more inconsistent than it was last season, where Villanova was able to take on South Dakota State and get to the next round of the FCS playoffs. So the offense will definitely be something to watch. But the good news for Villanova is that it's supposed to rain tomorrow in San Antonio. And you may be saying, David, well, why is the temperature being around 55, 50 degrees and rain going to favor Villanova? Well, first of all, they've been used to practicing and playing in colder temperatures. Incarnate Word is coming off the bye week. They practice in San Antonio. They're probably not ready for the rain and some of the colder weather that they're having. Temperatures have kind of been in the 60, 65 degree range recently in San Antonio. Temperature's going to be about 10 degrees less than that, and also a lot of rain. And Villanova, their offense is mainly through their rushing attack. And David Abbott, Villanova's rushing attack, had just 22 rushing yards last week in the first half, but they found a lot of success, had around 115, 120 rushing yards just in the second half of action against EKU, so they made a really good adjustment at halftime. And David Abbott had about 70 points alone in the second half. So we'll definitely keep an eye on the rushing attack, but the fact that it's going to rain means that this is probably going to be more of a rushing attack game for both teams, even though I think Incarnate Word just has such a good passing attack and Calzada is such a good quarterback, as I said earlier, one of the best in the FCS, almost 3,500 passing yards, that they're definitely going to throw the football. The rain is not going to stop them from doing that, but I think that Villanova will have a much better chance to win because they are a team that likes to, go to work on the ground and pick up a lot of yards in their running game. So David Abbott, Isaiah Ragland, Jabril Mace, I think all are primed to have pretty good games against Incarnate Word tomorrow. So this has been my preview. I mean, what a battle here in the second round of the FCS playoffs. Villanova, the number 11 seed, against Incarnate Word, the number 6 seed. Unfortunately, we won't have any WXVU broadcasting coverage for you in San Antonio, Texas, but I will have coverage on my social media here on my Twitter as well as my Instagram, and I'll be sharing that to our station media as well on our Twitter at WXVU and our sports Instagram at WXVU.sports. Tomorrow's game kicks off from San Antonio at 2 p.m. Should be a good one, Nova Nation. Thanks so much for listening to this preview, and as always, go Cats!